Hey, let's talk about artichokes. So this is on my side yard over here, kind of in a bit of a xeriscape landscape, but I do have some fruit trees. Behind me, I have the apricot tree. I have a peach tree over there. We have a new fig tree. And then I have behind the camera, which maybe we'll show in a different time, but a lot of different native wildflowers just to try to get the bees into my yard. Um, with the artichokes though, these are zones 7 through 11 if you're going to be planting artichokes. I'm in a zone 8A and they do really, really well right here. I mentioned that these are zones 7 through 11, but really the ideal temperatures for these to grow are in the 70s during a day, 70s and 50s in a night. So right now, this April that's been kind of mild here in southern Utah has been perfect for these artichokes. Right here, I have one artichoke, and we'll zoom in a second. But there are actually tons all over the bushes here. These grow really crazy. They'll get up to 4 foot by 4 foot. They can get 3 to 4 feet tall. I actually only have 4 plants here. You could probably only even see 3 because the other one's probably outside of the camera. But each plant can give me 6 to 10 on average of artichokes. And then this guy over here, this one has kind of divided and propagated and it's spread out quite a bit. I probably need to thin it out pretty good, but I'm expecting that I'm going to get far more off of this because if you can get to the bottom and look and see what's going on, there's multiple main stems coming up there. And so I think I'll get a lot of artichokes off of just this one. And the artichokes, I'll start to harvest these here pretty soon. They grow pretty quick. So the one that we just showed, I only noticed it maybe 10 days ago. And that was the only one I could notice at the time. And already I'm noticing quite a few more. So there's some hidden in here. There's some that are just starting. And we'll talk about when to harvest them. It's a fairly low maintenance plant. Um, and I really don't do a whole lot with it. I will cut it back once I harvest all of the artichokes off of this. I'll cut it back down to just a couple of inches, throw some mulch on top, and then I could get a second crop out of this in the fall. I also said that these are great for xeriscapes, for rocky land, for dirt areas that you have, just kind of areas that are probably off of the main way because they do take up so much space, but you can also grow them as an ornamental. If you like this large, deserty, thistle-like plant. And the artichokes themselves will turn into really big purple flowers if you want to just grow them for that purpose. But I would grow them to harvest the artichoke itself. One issue that I've always had with the artichokes is aphids. Aphids are really drawn to these. And I have a short that you can check out that talks about aphids on my tomatoes where I've never really had issues in the past, but on how to take care of some of the aphids. You can also blast them off with a high pressure hose. And you can, if that doesn't work, then you can use a low concentration of like Dawn dish soap with, like blast it with water and that might help as well. As far as the soil itself, they're really not that picky. So long as it's a well-drained soil, so a sandy or loamy soil is really what they're looking for. Just something that's not going to get the roots waterlogged. So if it can drain well, they're not going to be super picky on it. What I do on mine, I just have a drip system that will hit the bottom of the plant every couple of days. Right now, once it gets warmer, I'll hit them daily probably. And then, like I said, I'll cut them back in the bulk or the heat of the summer. And at that point, I really don't need to do much with them. They'll go dormant. I'll cover them up with some mulch, and then I'll get a second crop once the heat kind of dies down a bit. So let's look at some of these artichokes over here. You can see how they start to grow. You're going to get several buds, and this is a flower bud that starts to grow off of the side and off a tall stem. The tallest ones, the highest up, are generally going to get the biggest. You're not going to all harvest them at the exact same day, but at the same time, you're also not looking for the same size because you're really not judging it just off of size. Let's look at this one and I'll tell you what I'm saying or explain what I mean. You're judging it off of when the bud starts to open up. This one, Despite not being as big as I want, it's getting close. Once these bottom um, leaves down here start to open up just a little more, then I'm going to want to harvest this, because if that top spot opens, it's too late. When I harvest, you'll take a couple inches of the stem, and this portion of the stem here is also edible, kind of like the heart of the artichoke is. So as far as what a good artichoke looks like ready to harvest, you can kind of see here in this picture of what one would look like when you're ready to harvest it. And when it goes too far and you've missed your harvest date, it's going to look more like this. But this one also has a flower starting, and that's far too gone. Even before the purple thistle starts to show on the flower, you need to catch it before that. So again, these take up a ton of space, and there's a whole lot of these branches and leaves coming off of this. I can clean these up. I don't need these lower leaves on here, and they're actually really good for the compost. They break down really quick. So every once in a while when it gets unruly, especially when I'm walking on them like I just did, I'll come in and I'll chop those bottom leaves off and I'll throw them into the compost. But you don't need to do that. The only time I'd recommend that you definitely do that is when they're starting to die or they're turning yellow or they're diseased. Then make sure you get those leaves or branches off of the plant and don't put them in your compost. Just throw them away. With any diseased plant, don't put it back into your soil. Don't put it back into the compost. So that's kind of how I manage our artichokes. We get quite a few off of these. These plants can last 6 years. I've had these particular plants in. I think this will be the third year on these ones. Before that, I had them in a different spot in the yard that just wasn't great because of how much space they took up. You do want to consider the sun. They like full sun, but when you're in the southwest like I am and the sun is so hot, then you want to do the afternoon shade. And that's often the case with your vegetables that require full sun. That afternoon sun can be really harsh here. And so in this situation, my apricot tree is actually going to shade these in the afternoon in the summer. But before it gets too hot, they'll be cut down. And then at that point, the watermelons that are behind here start to take over. So we'll talk about that later in the season. But let me know what you've done, especially how have you managed your artichoke plants? If you've had aphid problems, what do you do to take care of those? Because I've tried a few things, and this seems to be one of the plants that I continue to struggle with. But I'm curious to see what you guys do, and let me know if you have any questions or any comments. Thanks.